Greetings, welcome back. And here we go. So how long has today been for me? When it started, it was yesterday. Now it's tomorrow. I'm not quite sure what day it is, but I know I'm recording this. This is the latest I've recorded of power rankings in a long time. Like, it has been a very long time. So for people in Europe, they're going to see this in no notifications. They're going to be like, oh, how long has he been up? Oh, we're worried about him. Well, about 15 hours ago, I set up my board to start doing the morning games. And here I am. And it's been nonstop hockey or waiting to see if we're going to have more hockey ever since. So today, power rankings, and keep in mind that these are not legally binding. It's not really a big deal. It's more for fun than anything else. And I appreciate people who enjoy the fun and like to see where teams are every week. And the complaint department can be reached at you're probably taking this too seriously, but that's okay because people tend to do this at gmail.edu.gov.au. So if you email that, I promise we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And all of the various elves that help me with the power rank. There's like elves. I've been up long enough. I'm seeing elves. All right. Director's telling me to hurry up, which is amazing because I don't have a director. Number 31 this week. They went six. They're 6-9-3 now. They went 0-3 this week. And we're starting with the West. It's Anaheim. You know, for Anaheim, this is the lowest they've been. They can't score, and it's become really alarming just how poor the offense is for the Anaheim Ducks. It is almost depressing to watch. And again, I say that as somebody, I'm not really a Ducks fan. I don't hate the Ducks like I used to because I met a bunch of Ducks fans and went to a game in Anaheim last year. Curse you. But and I say that in a loving manner because sometimes the hate's the most fun part of watching sports. Now I can't. But yeah, the Ducks, it's 31st, and it's been rough. 30th, staying in the same spot as last week. They're now 5-12-3. They went 1-2-1 this week. And for Detroit, they're bringing up the rear. I wanted to put the East, but yeah, Central. They're 30th overall, so technically they pass Anaheim because Anaheim drops below them. But for Detroit, they try hard. They had the one really, really rough game against Florida. It was really a rough first period, but Detroit's going to have those games, and they're right about where it was expected. I know Anaheim, not much was expected from them either. Number 29, they're 4-14-1. They went 1-2 this week, and so for Ottawa, it's kind of more of the same. So for Ottawa, they're 29th, and that's where they've been 2 weeks in a row. I don't see Ottawa ending up much higher than that. The Canadian division's tough, and you know it's interesting because we can have the debate about whether or not there's contenders in the Canadian division. I don't think it's a debate whether or not there's good teams, whether or not there's elite teams. There's a whole debate to be had with that. But yeah, Ottawa's going to have a rough time from here. Number 28, these guys are 8-12-1. They went 1-1-1 this week. So again, from Canada, we've got the Vancouver Canucks. So they did move up this week. They moved up 3 spots, but it's faint praise. Having them ahead of Anaheim, Detroit, and Ottawa is faint praise. It means they got better. The overtime loss was, then they won that game, which was good, and then the loss against Winnipeg was frustrating. But they're at least in every game. They're not going to make the playoffs, but they're in every game. And so there's still positives to take out of it if you're a Canucks fan. At least I do my best to find those positives. Number 27. They went 1-1 this week. But the more alarming thing, really, when it comes to Nashville, is that apparently this is potentially going to get torn apart. So they're now down to 7-10. They dropped 3 spots from where they were last week, basically getting passed by other teams that are just playing better. Nashville comes up with a win tonight, which I thought said something about them playing desperate hockey, and Columbus not able to win a game that they desperately needed. So kind of both storylines get told tonight. And so for Nashville, I have them at 27th. Maybe they can dig their way out of this. Maybe all the rumors of trades will be enough to snap them out of it. Number 26. This team went 1-3 this week, and I feel bad for them. They dropped 3 spots from where they were last week too. And that's Buffalo. And I feel bad for Buffalo, who are 8th in the East right here. Buffalo right here, 26th. feel bad for them because it wasn't their fault that they ended up having that break and they came out really bad out of that break. Today's win over New Jersey might be a turning point. Definitely move them up past Nashville in my eyes. I switched the two today based on Buffalo's play and Nashville's, and I went, I'll put Buffalo a little bit ahead of Nashville. But yeah, Buffalo, it's frustrating, and I can understand why fans would feel bad because at the time that they got taken out by New Jersey having the outbreak and passing it on to them, Buffalo looked like they were turning the corner, and then they lose the first 3 games in the return, and they just looked like they were out of gas in both games against the Islanders. It's frustrating, but I drop them down to 26th. 25th. We're going back to Canada for this one. So the Canadian division's got a few teams that aren't playing very well. And I think Calgary fans will admit they're not playing very well. So this week they were 1-3. They now have a record of 8-9-1. They dropped 6 spots from where they were last week. So that's remarkable. That I've got 3 Canadian teams here. I've got 1 from the East, 1 from the West, and 2 from the Central. For people who don't skip to the end. For people who are keeping track. I can't imagine just skipping it. Anyway, it's just me. Just me. If I'm a subscriber to a channel, I watch the entire video. But again, that's just me, right? Number 24. I'm old, so I don't have anything else to do with my time anyways. Number 24. These guys are now 7-7-2. They were 2-0-1 this week. And so they move up 1 spot, and we'll see what they might be able to do from here, and that's San Jose. There's still things about San Jose's game that are alarming. Their goals against / save percentage / defense. Whichever part of the team you want to look at and overanalyze. There's definitely a lot there to overanalyze with San Jose. But they didn't lose in regulation this week, and to me, yes, I would put them ahead of Calgary. So that was one of those swaps I did tonight where I said, yeah, no, I would put them ahead of Calgary. Because while Calgary, their defensive numbers aren't adding up, right now, record-wise, San Jose, I think, is playing better. And again, they're close. They're really, really close. Does San Jose go higher than 24th? We'll see. We'll see how they do this coming week. Number 23. These guys move up. They've been back and forth. They really have. They move up 3 spots from last week. They were 2-1 this week, and that's the Rangers. So they're 6-7-3 altogether. And again, on any given week, Ranger fans might be on the cliff. They might not be. There are some that understand this year's probably not the year anyways, so it's fine. Because this is a really tough division. So being below 500 against this division isn't embarrassing or anything. It's just, that's how tough this division is. And the Rangers, I would think, are looking at next season as that's the year where they really want to take that step. When you get an 82-game schedule and you're in regular divisions, it's a normal schedule. That should benefit a team like the Rangers. Whether this season's already a lost cause or not, they're not playing like it is. They're really not playing like it is. They had a very good game today. So we'll see whether or not they can back that up and keep that going for them. Number 22. Rough week for these guys. What's interesting is they were 1-1-1. They're now 7-7-3. So they're staying in the mix. They dropped 1 spot from where they were last week, and that's Arizona. So Arizona, we're still in the West. And the interesting thing to me is that I moved them up based on their play against St. Louis, right? That 7-game series. But now they're against other teams, and against LA, they just, I don't know, it's just not there. And it's kind of back to where I had been concerned about Arizona, like whether it's that maybe Darcy Kemper's God tier status would take a bit of a hit. They just didn't have enough offense to overcome some of their deficiencies. Yeah, Arizona's having some problems. And we'll see whether or not they can dig their way out of them. Again, in the West, that 4th place team, that's really the bar. Any of these teams in the West, they're looking at that 4th spot. And it's achievable, but it's going to be tricky. Number 21. What's interesting is this team didn't play this week because, Texas doesn't have power. So Dallas ended up having all of their games postponed. This is a rough go for Dallas because for them, they were already looking at a really tough schedule. So they're still 5-3-4. They drop a spot from where they were last week. And it is getting troubling just how many games of theirs are being delayed. And how much they're going to have to play over a very short period of time when they're already having trouble securing wins heading into this next pause. This is their second pause of the year. So there's troubling signs, and Dallas may very well be a team that ends up missing the playoffs. That was unexpected. I didn't expect them to be a division winner or anything. This is a tough division for them, and after that Stanley Cup final run, I thought the expectations were probably too high for them, but this is rough. Number 20. We're going back to the West, and a team that moves up 7 spots from last week because they were 3-0 this week. And you're forgiven for not knowing they were undefeated this week. They went 3-0. They're now 7-6-3, and that's the Kings. So the LA Kings are back up to 20th. That's the highest they've been on the power rankings. They're back up to 5th in the West. They basically swapped spots with San Jose. Not because San Jose moved down, because they didn't, but because LA moves up. So for the LA Kings, they're playing very well. Had to put them ahead of Arizona based on the last couple of games. And the real key for them is going to be whether or not they can win enough games against teams ahead of them and beat Minnesota in the season series and make things really interesting. But there are a lot of positives if you're an LA Kings fan right now, whether it's the emergence of Peterson as a legit number one goaltender, whether it's Anderson Dolan and his play, Velarde taking that next step as well, even if he's not getting the points that were expected of him. And just the fact that they're putting together a pretty decent record without a lot of their young stars being a part of it yet. So there's a lot of hope for the future if you're a Kings fan right now. Number 19. Less of a rosy story here. These guys went 1-2 this week. They are now 8-7-4 overall, and that's Columbus. So from one week to the next with Columbus, again, I don't see in Columbus, I don't see a contender, and I don't see a team right now that makes the playoffs. I think that Chicago is making it so that they're the most likely team to get that 4th spot. Lots of time for that to change, but that's how it's looking to me. The loss for Columbus tonight against Nashville, I thought said as much about Columbus as it did about anything else going on, and I thought that was a really tough loss for them. You need that game. You desperately need that game, and you're at home, and it just doesn't happen for them. So for Columbus, we'll see what happens. But again, their record overall is 8-7-4, which means they've won 8 out of 19 games. That's just not going to be good enough. They can't keep winning at that rate and end up making the playoffs. Odds are they'll end up behind either Dallas or Chicago or whoever, because it's the way that's going to work. Number 18. Going back to the East for this one. They move up 4 spots. They were 2-1 this week, and that's New Jersey. So yes, they lost today. I didn't penalize them for that. So I've got them 6th in their division. I've got them 18th overall. Like I said, they moved up 4 spots. Compared to some of the other teams coming out of their COVID pause, New Jersey's played pretty well. Today against Buffalo, it just felt more like it was personal for the Buffalo Sabres. They were angry. And the Devils, by the time they woke up and started equaling that, it was too late and they were too far behind. But New Jersey's played well. Their winning percentage isn't too shabby. They're now 6-4-2. If they can win 2 out of 3 every week, they probably make the playoffs. So, one thing about only playing in your own division, your destiny's in your own hands. Number 17, they went 2-1 this week. Some shakiness here and there, but that's to be expected. They're 9-6-4 now. They move up 1 spot from last week, and that's Chicago. Chicago has moved up every single week on the power rankings. All of them. The Chicago Blackhawks have moved up every single week. I'm 99% sure of that. I actually have been keeping every single power rankings, the paper that I use for that every single week. Pretty sure they started out at the bottom, and now they're 17th. So they're making a slow but steady climb, which is how power rankings are supposed to work. It's not supposed to be, okay, this week everything's completely different. Okay, now next week everything's completely different. I used to do that. Say, 3 years ago, and I found the power rankings were far too reactionary, and they would just be crazy and ridiculous every week. So that's why, for people who wonder, well, why don't the power rankings change a whole lot? Because, again, if they're just too reactionary, then they really, to me, don't mean a whole lot. All right, number 16. And again, the email address I gave at the start still works. Number 16. So we're over halfway through. These guys went 2-2 this week. I don't think the Islanders are better or worse than where I had them last week. So for the Islanders, I have them 5th in the division. And I have them 16th overall. Pretty good team. They go 2-2. I thought the loss against Pittsburgh tonight, I thought that was a nice gutsy win for Pittsburgh. But again, it just shows that for the Islanders, it's going to be tough for them to get in. It's going to be very tough for them to get in. And if they don't, I think some questions will get asked. But that division is so difficult in the first place. I mean, look at the 4 teams that are out right now. Buffalo, Rangers, New Jersey, and New York. And again, that's just according to the power rankings. And you could make the argument that New Jersey looks pretty good, and the Islanders absolutely should be in there. So that's where we're at. Number 15. And these guys drop, although they went 2-1 this week, I did drop them, and that's Minnesota. So Minnesota this week, they win both games against Anaheim, right? But they had that shutout loss against the Kings, and again, it's just Anaheim is so... it's hard for me to look at 2 wins against Anaheim and say, well, I should move them up beyond where they were. So they dropped after the first loss they had this week, and they move up a little bit at the end of the week with the back-to-back wins over Anaheim, but not much. So I have them at 15th. They're 8-6. Right now they're technically in the playoffs. I have updated this. I'll talk about that after I've got up to number 1. But I have them 4th in their division, but the Kings are right there. The Kings are absolutely right there. And yeah, if the Kings can own Minnesota in that matchup, Kings can get that spot. Number 14. Here's the dive of the week. And last week, people wanted me to make them dive. Now, they went 2-2 this week. They're now 8-5-3. They dropped 8 spots from last week, and that's Washington. There are real concerns now if you're Washington. I still think they should make the playoffs, but look at the teams that are behind them on this board. New Jersey's getting better. The Islanders are probably going to win games they shouldn't because of Varlamov, and they're going to win games that they otherwise wouldn't because of the system they play. So the Caps, there's some reason to be concerned there. Ovechkin's been kind of quiet goal-scoring-wise for the last couple of weeks. We'll see if that picks up for him, but there are reasons to be concerned for the Capitals, and so I dropped them this week. This week, they took the drop that they didn't take last week. I thought, no, I'm going to give it more time, and then, we'll see whether or not they end up down into the second row next week. If they have another mediocre week, they could very well find themselves down below, say, like New Jersey. They could end up down here next week in their division. Number 13, dropping 1 spot from last week, although they went 2-1. They actually won 2 out of 3. They're now 10-6-1. So if Jets fans want to say I'm being too tough on them, I could understand that. I could totally understand that. I would also answer with they beat Vancouver. They look decent in that game, but there's with Winnipeg, I do think they're the 4th best team in the North, and this is why. If you're a Flames fan, you have every reason to be concerned because I think the Jets are better than the Flames. And then you have the Oilers, the Leafs, and the Canadiens, who I think are all better than the Flames too. And so for Calgary, Vancouver, and Ottawa, we're already in a situation where those are the 3 most likely to miss the playoffs. But Winnipeg, we'll see how it goes for them this coming week. They have another game against Vancouver tomorrow. By this time tomorrow night, they may be back up to 12th. If they get back up to 12th, this is the team that they would bump down. With the 3-1 record this week, so they played very, very well this week. They're now 9-6-1. They move up 4 spots, and that's Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Penguins, they're playing well. Never, ever, 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 ever count out a team with Sidney Crosby on it. It's a bad idea. In fact, don't count out Sidney Crosby. It's a bad idea. I understand it's been over 3 years since they won their last Stanley Cup. I don't count them out when it comes to making the playoffs. Sure, they may not win anything in the playoffs, but I'm not going to count them out when it comes to making the playoffs and having good regular seasons and overcoming injuries. It's what they do every single year. Jari's rounding into form. Malkin's starting to pick up points here and there, and Letang got a couple of goals tonight. So Pittsburgh, to me, is starting to really play like Pittsburgh. And what was impressive was them beating the Islanders at their own game. That was impressive for me tonight. Next up. Number 11, they move up 3 spots from where they were last week. They actually went 3-1. They're now 12-8. That's the Oilers. The Oilers, just outside the top 10. Almost top 10 on this board. And if they have another week like this one, yeah, they're top 10. They're top 10. They may even end up top 7 depending on what teams ahead of them do. The Oilers are scary good when they're on. They can look awful when they're off. When their defensive game is off, when the goaltending isn't very good, they are terrible. But when they're on, a game like tonight, everything comes up roses. Now, yes, tonight they got a bunch of points from McDavid, but in the game they won before this, they got no points from McDavid. If they're becoming a team that doesn't need McDavid and Draisaitl scoring to win games, that's that scary extra added piece of pressure you can put on another team that they haven't had, where you don't just have to shut down Draisaitl and McDavid, as if that's easy, right? Number 10. These guys had a rough week. They were 1-2. But while they only won 1 out of 3 games, I didn't move them down. Actually, they go up 1 spot. They're 10-6-2, but we'll see how this week goes, and that's St. Louis. So for St. Louis, the only reason they move up, is because of the dive taken by the Capitals. Otherwise, they'd still be in 11th place. So that's why they end up moving up 1 spot. I didn't see anything this week to tell me St. Louis was in the wrong spot, really. Yeah, they lost against San Jose, but they woke up. They came back from 4-1 down. Just came up short in the end. I'll write that off as maybe that was just a poor game, and maybe that's just a one-off. We'll see this week whether or not it was. And if it wasn't, then yeah, they'll take a bit of a drop. But you'll notice that from them to Minnesota, there's a bit of a gap there. So the gap between 3rd and 4th in the division, in my eyes, is still pretty decent. Number 9. They only played 1 game this week. It's a shame. It really is. So they dropped 1 spot from where they were last week. They're now 9-5-2, and that's Montreal. So Montreal drops 1 spot. It's one of those things where you look at the schedule and you're like, really, they haven't played all week. All right. You don't like to use that as an excuse because for Toronto, they're probably saying, yeah, but they're rested. They can get healed up. We haven't. We've had to play all these games. So I can understand both sides of it. To me, Montreal drops the 1 spot because somebody passed them. In fact, there's 2 teams that passed Montreal this week. So Montreal passes Washington, but 2 teams pass Montreal because a bit of a shift going on here. Number 8, also reflecting part of that shift. These guys only played once this week too, as they come back from their break, their unscheduled break. They lost in overtime in the 1 game, right? They get the extra point, and that's Philadelphia. So I didn't really penalize Philadelphia too much. They were off for quite a while. They lose the game after the return. They don't look fantastic in it, but remember, they're still shorthanded by 6 players. And tomorrow against Boston, I will keep that in mind. I do consider that sometimes with the power rankings too. If I feel like, well, the schedule wasn't very kind, I'll take that into consideration. Or, well, they had a bunch of guys hurt for that game and not for this game, so what does that tell me? So for me, Philadelphia, I didn't really bust them because they only played the 1 game. That's it. Number 7. These guys moved up, and they keep moving up. And I get the feeling they're going to keep moving up. They're now 11-3-2. They were 3-1 this week. They moved up 3 spots, and that's the Florida Panthers. So the Florida Panthers are 7th. Yep, they're making believers out of me, or a believer out of me. Believers, I haven't been up that long that I'm seeing other people around here that are also me, but yet. But Florida, yeah, they've really proved themselves this week, and they've been proving themselves every week. So Florida, who started out 17th, I've got the paperwork here. I might as well just do the homework here. Week 1, I had Florida, 17th. Oh, look at that. So they've moved up 10 spots since I started doing the power rankings. They might move up further, but it's been a pretty good time for them, and I mean they have trouble with Detroit, but they've beaten Detroit 4 out of 6 games, so it's not that much trouble, and they beat Detroit the game before that, so I didn't want to punish them for that. That's not very nice, is it? Number 6, they go 3-0-1 this week. They move up 3 spots. They're 12-3-1 now themselves, and that's Carolina. So we'll go ahead, we'll put Carolina right here in 6th spot, and this nice Hartford Whalers one right under here. And yes, those are Pogs. Those are absolutely Pogs. There's no reason for people to shame Pogs and not use them. Pogs are just fine. So yeah, I have Carolina at number 6. They're playing very, very well. Tonight against Tampa, they made it look relatively easy. This is where Tampa fans jump in and go, well, we've got injuries too. I know who they've got injuries to, so I'm trying not to bust them too much. But at some point, they're going to get busted down, and Carolina and Florida could find themselves up in this region. So we'll see how things go again, coming 7 days. But yeah, reasonable to have them that high up. Number 5. Rough week for these guys. They're now 10-4-1. They dropped 2 spots from where they were last week. They were 1-2 this week, and that's Vegas. Vegas Golden Knights. No longer number 1 in the West, and number 5 overall on the board. So the reverse retros, they lost wearing them. I don't know. Again, the reverse retros seem to be cursed for everybody right now. Like, why don't the Kings wear this? Just put a spiffy gray version of this with some purple in it and look fantastic. You know, they sparkly silver. But hey, Vegas I have top 5 still, so they lost 2 out of 3. The game against Colorado, I didn't want to punish anybody coming out of that game because that Tahoe game was ridiculous. So I kind of went, because here's the thing. So I'll use number 4 here to explain this too. This team went 2-1 this week. They're 9-4-1 now. They move up 1 spot from last week, and that's Colorado. So Colorado's number 4. They're number 1 in the West. Yes, that's a Quebec Nordiques Pog. No problem. It's all fine. It's all good. It's fine. It's fine. Colorado did beat Vegas back-to-back. So it was an outdoor game. I wouldn't want to overreact to it, but Colorado played a decent game. They did beat them twice in a row. And so I thought, all right, so I'll swap the 2 of them. Coming into today, Vegas was 4th, Colorado was 5th. I just swapped them tonight. That's it. Just saying, you know what? Colorado beat them twice in a row. I can't have Colorado behind Vegas. So I still have 3 in the West in the top 10, relatively close to each other. And it's the same 3 that have been there all season. But we'll see whether or not Vegas bounces back. We know they will. We can just act surprised when they do, right? Number 3, dropping 2 spots from last week. They went 0-2 this week. They had some games postponed. They're now 10-4-1, and that's Tampa. So, yep, the injury bug has been claiming Tampa as of late. I still have them first in their division on the power rankings. But again, Carolina and Florida get really close. So last week, Tampa's number 1, right? Carolina was 9th, Florida was 10th. Now Tampa Bay's 3rd, Carolina's 6th, Florida's 7th. So that's, again, that shows how much closer they're getting in my eyes. And again, at some point, Tampa's losses will start to cause them to have a bit of a fall. Think along the lines like the Capitals, where I waited a couple weeks, and then when it was clear that there's just something going on, it's not working, they drop. So if Tampa has another week like this one, they drop. Number 2, this is where I kind of had to think this one over tonight. So Boston only played 1 game this week. Toronto played 4. So those are the last 2 teams not on the board, right? So let's go ahead and talk about team number 2 before we get to team number 1. Team number 2 stays in the same spot they were last week, and that's Boston. They lost the game against New Jersey, and if you want to see some of the funniest items on Twitter, just look at anything said over the last 24 hours by Brad Marchand. Yeah, Marchand is just ruthless on Twitter, so Brad, if you see this, I'm sorry you guys are number 2. Please, I apologize greatly. So Boston lost the only game they played this week. So I'm looking at this board, and I'm saying, okay, Tampa can't be number 1, right? Tampa lost 2 out of 3. Colorado, not a number 1 team. Vegas, they lost 2 out of 3. They're not number 1. I'm not going to have Carolina just rush to number 1 or Florida rush to number 1. They're gradually making their way up the board. So there was only 1 team that I could put at number 1. There was only 1 team that worked. And yet, Monday, I had a huge chuckle, right? So while Boston only played the one game this week, these guys played 4. And they won 3. And I have them at number 1. The Toronto Maple Leafs right now, they go 3-0-1 this week. And yes, the Ottawa Senators came back from 5-1 down and beat them 6-5. Hilarious, right? They then beat Ottawa twice. And then they went out tonight and they beat Montreal. In Montreal. I know without fans in attendance, that does make a difference. But still, right now, Toronto is 14-3-2. They have 30 points. By points percentage, by overall points, by all standards you would use to measure a team's performance right now, Toronto ends up number 1. And so there's been other weeks where I've had Leafs fans saying, oh, clearly he hates Toronto because he won't put them at number 1. They belong and they belong. They didn't. I would argue they do right now. You can only go by that division and how they're doing in that division. And this week they bounced back from a huge loss. They've had a lot of external criticism, and I'm sure they hear it because in Toronto it's deafening, right? But I genuinely think they belong at number 1 this week. I don't know how long they stay there. Boston has a really good week this week. Boston could be number 1. And Boston, if they'd had a good week this week, likely would have been number 1. But they lost the only game they played. I can't take a team that lost the only game they played this week and put them at number 1. It doesn't make sense. So Toronto gets number 1. If the playoffs started now and we're going by winning percentage, Carolina would be first in the Central, would play Dallas. Florida would be second and would play Tampa. So that would be insane. The West would have Vegas first against Minnesota fourth, Colorado second, St. Louis is third. Those 4 do not change from last week. In the East, first would be Boston. They would play Pittsburgh, which would be an amazing series. Philadelphia would have home ice against Washington. And then in the North, Toronto, the number 1 seed, would play the Oilers, who are still number 4 despite all their wins, because Montreal and Winnipeg had a cushion on them coming into it. So Montreal-Winnipeg would still be 2-3. And there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And it's 12:52 a.m. So technically these are power rankings for February 21st. But I'll title it February 20th. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I have no problem with having been watching hockey, taking notes, and doing videos for 15.5 hours. Because I have 180,000 subscribers. And plenty more other people who are not subscribers who watch my videos daily. And I know this because they tell me that when I travel. I'm not a subscriber, but I watch all your videos. That's fine too. Thank you for all your support, and I will talk to you again soon. And it's okay if you subscribe late too. That's perfectly acceptable. I think I can go to bed now.